Let me tell you how a piece of sidewalk chalk, a five-legged unicorn, and a woman who weaponized beige led to 2 police cruisers and a Channel 4 news van being parked on my lawn. It wasn't a journey I planned, but as they say, when life gives you a homeowners association, you find a way to make fantastically petty, artistically rendered lemonade. It all started, as so many suburban conflicts do, on a Saturday. One of those perfect late spring Saturdays where the sky is an impossible, cloudless blue and the hum of lawnmowers forms a soothing symphony of domesticity. This was the American dream, or at least the 30-year fixed-rate version of it. I was Mark, a man whose greatest ambition for the day was to grill a perfect medium-rare burger and watch his kids exhaust themselves into an early bedtime. I was lounging on my porch, a satisfyingly cold beer sweating onto a coaster beside me, watching the source of my joy and impending bankruptcy, my 2 children. Leo, my 8-year-old, was the serious artist. He was sprawled on the concrete, tongue sticking out in concentration, meticulously crafting a multicolored dragon. Next to him, 6-year-old Mia, my agent of pure chaos, was bringing her masterpiece to life. A unicorn. It was glorious. Leo's dragon looked less like a mythical beast and more like a lizard that had swallowed a traffic light. But it was his lizard. Mia's unicorn had 5 legs, which felt biologically ambitious. But who was I to stifle innovation? This, right here, was the suburban dream. A mortgage, 2 kids, a driveway canvas, and the blissful ignorance of what was about to march down the sidewalk. Her name was Carol, but in the cul-de-sac, she was known by other, more whispered titles: the Beige Baroness, the HOA Herald, the Fun Sponge. She was a woman who saw a blade of grass over 2 inches high, not as a failure of landscaping, but as a personal moral failing on the part of the homeowner. The sun was warm on my face, the beer was cold in my hand, and the sound of my kids' laughter was punctuated by the scrape of chalk on concrete. It was a symphony of simple contentment. Leo was explaining the finer points of his creation to his sister. "See, Mia, the green scales are for camouflage, but the orange scales are because he ate a spicy pepper, and now he can breathe fire." "Wow," Mia said, her eyes wide. She added a 6th leg to her unicorn. "My unicorn Sparklehoof can run so fast she makes rainbows come out of her butt." "That's not how rainbows work," Leo said, ever the pragmatist. "It is for Sparklehoof," she declared, with the unshakable certainty only a 6-year-old can possess. I chuckled into my beer. This was it. This was the good stuff. The little moments you file away for a rainy day. I had just closed my eyes, soaking it all in, when a shadow fell across the porch. A shadow that somehow felt judgmental. I opened my eyes. It was Carol, and she was holding the book, capital T, capital B. The 3-ring binder containing the sacred text of the Northwood Estates Homeowners Association bylaws, a document she consulted more often than the Bible and with twice the fervor. She had it bookmarked. Of course, she had it bookmarked. Carol moved with the stiff, purposeful gait of a woman on a holy mission. She wore a visor, a pastel pink tracksuit that screamed, "I power walk and I judge," and a facial expression that suggested she'd just smelled something foul, and that something foul was my family's unmitigated joy. "Mark," she said. Her voice was thin and tight, like a wire pulled taut. "Oh, hey, Carol, beautiful day, isn't it?" I said, forcing a neighborly smile. Her eyes weren't on me. They were fixed on the vibrant, chalky battlefield on my sidewalk. She scanned the lopsided unicorn and the dyspeptic dragon as if they were gang graffiti. "I don't mean to be a bother," she began, which is the universal opening line for someone who is absolutely, positively about to be a bother. But this display is a bit much, don't you think? I glanced at my kids who had fallen silent and were now watching this exchange with the wide, curious eyes of children observing a strange new zoo animal. It's just chalk, Carol. The kids are having fun, I said, keeping my tone light. A light drizzle and this whole epic battle between a fire-breathing lizard and a flatulent unicorn will be nothing but a memory. She was not amused. She licked her thumb and flipped to a pre-marked page in the book. The rules are quite clear. Section 4, Article B, Subsection C. All exterior property surfaces, including but not limited to driveways and walkways, must be maintained in a clean, uniform, and unaltered state to preserve neighborhood aesthetic harmony. She looked up at me, a triumphant glint in her eye. This is a non-sanctioned property alteration. I blinked. I actually blinked. For a second, I thought it was a joke. A very dry, very weird joke. Carol, it's chalk. It's designed to be temporary. It's literally made for this. It's visual pollution, she sniffed. The dust can get airborne and contaminate my prize-winning azaleas. Furthermore, it sets a precedent. First, it's chalk drawings. Next, it's people painting their houses purple. It's a slippery slope, Mark. This is lowering property values as we speak. My smile was starting to feel like a poorly maintained dam, holding back a flood of sarcasm. I'm pretty sure Zillow doesn't have an algorithm that dings a house price based on the presence of a six-legged unicorn, Carol. That was a mistake. Her eyes narrowed. I take the aesthetic harmony of this community very seriously. Some of us do. She pulled out her phone. I'm documenting this for the official report. She proceeded to take several pictures of the artwork from different angles, like a crime scene photographer. The kids were starting to look upset. Leo looked at his dragon, then at me, his lip trembling slightly. That was it. The dam broke. Okay, Carol, you've made your point. You've documented the crime scene. Is there anything else? I asked, my voice a few degrees colder. I expect this to be rectified. Immediately, she said. She gave one last withering glare at Sparklehoof, turned on her heel, and marched back to her beige, soulless, and perfectly orderly house. I watched her go, then looked at my kids. Mia's eyes were glassy with tears. Is Sparklehoof illegal? She whispered. Something inside me snapped. No, sweetie. Sparklehoof is not illegal. She's a masterpiece, I said, forcing a grin. But I think she and the dragon need to go to sleep for now. That evening, after I'd hosed the vibrant menagerie into a gray, swirling puddle that disappeared down the storm drain, I was fuming. I paced the living room, recounting the entire, insane conversation to my wife, Sarah. She, to her credit, was trying to be sympathetic, but I could see the laughter dancing in her eyes. Aesthetic harmony? She repeated, finally letting a giggle escape. Did she really say that? She had the book, Sarah. She quoted scripture at me, Section 4, Article B, whatever. I threw my hands up in the air. She made Mia cry over a chalk drawing. Who does that? A very lonely, very bored person, probably, Sarah said, her voice softening. Just let it go, Mark. It's not worth it. We'll buy the kids some new coloring books. But I couldn't let it go. It wasn't about the chalk anymore. It was about the principle of the thing. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of trying to legislate children's fun out of existence. It was about the tyranny of beige. Later that night, long after Sarah and the kids were asleep, I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind still buzzing with righteous indignation. I grabbed my phone, intending to scroll through mindless videos until I passed out. I scrolled past cooking tutorials, political arguments, and videos of cats falling off furniture. And then I saw it. It was a time-lapse video. An artist, on his hands and knees on a city street, was creating a chasm. A deep, terrifyingly realistic crack in the earth, complete with glowing lava at the bottom. It was an optical illusion, a masterpiece of forced perspective. People in the video were gasping, taking pictures, pretending to leap across it. It was made with pastels, chalk, the same medium as my kid's felonious unicorn. I sat bolt upright in bed. The screen of my phone cast a pale blue light on my face. An idea began to form. A terrible, glorious, beautiful, and breathtakingly petty idea. A slow, malicious, brilliant smile spread across my face. She wants to complain about chalk? Fine. Let's give her something to complain about. Let's not just bring a knife to a gunfight. Let's bring a tactical, artistically rendered, photorealistic nuclear bomb. The next morning, I was a man possessed. I kissed Sarah and the kids goodbye, retreated to my home office, and dove headfirst into the surprisingly niche world of professional pavement artists. My search history looked like the beginning of a very strange witness protection plan. 3D sidewalk artist for hire, commission optical illusion art, artist for petty revenge projects. The first call was a disaster. I found the website of a man who called himself Jean-Pierre, an ephemeral artist whose black and white portfolio featured moody photos of rain-streaked chalk poems. He answered the phone with a gravelly bonjour. Hi, Jean-Pierre. My name is Mark. I'm looking to commission a piece of chalk art for my sidewalk. Ah, a patron, he purred. And what is the soul of the piece? What message do you wish to convey about the transience of the urban landscape? The message is basically, hey, Carol, mind your own business. It's for my neighbor. There was a long, offended silence. Monsieur, he finally said, his voice dripping with disdain. My medium is the fleeting soul of the city, a commentary on the impermanence of existence. I do not engage in suburban squabbles. My fee starts at $10,000. I hung up before he could say another word. The second call was to a company called Happy Little Murals. A cheerful woman answered. Hi, I'm looking for a chalk artist. Wonderful. Is this for a birthday party or a nursery? She chirped. We do wonderful cartoon animals. We have a delightful giraffe that's very popular. I was thinking of something a little more terrifying. Like a giant chasm opening up to the fiery pits of hell. Another silence. Oh, I don't think our giraffe can do that. Click. I was starting to lose hope. Maybe this was a stupid idea. Maybe I should just buy a bunch of lawn gnomes and point them all at Carol's house. Then I found it. The website was a chaotic mess of flashing GIFs and edgy fonts, but the portfolio was breathtaking. It was a site for an artist named Julian Vane, with the tagline, Illusions and Pavement Profanities. His gallery was filled with mind-bending creations, a giant spider that looked like it was crawling out of the sewer, a koi pond so real you'd want to dip your toes in, a massive, photorealistic eyeball staring up from the pavement. This was my guy. I dialed the number. A laid-back, youthful voice answered. Jules's line, you got the man himself. Hi, Julian. My name is Mark. I found your website, and I have a proposition for you. I decided to just go for it. I laid out the entire story. The kids, the chalk, Sparklehoof, the six-legged unicorn, Carol and her bylaw Bible, my desire for artistic, temporary, and legally defensible revenge. I finished, slightly out of breath, and waited for him to hang up. Instead, I heard a low chuckle, followed by the distinct sound of a vape pen. A cloud of what I imagined was mango-scented vapor was exhaled. So, let me get this straight. he said, his voice alight with amusement. You want to weaponize art against a suburban despot? You want to commission a series of optical illusions on your own property with the specific intent of driving your HOA-obsessed neighbor slowly and completely insane. That about sums it up, yeah. Bro, he said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. You speak my language. This isn't a commission, it's a calling. A suburban Banksy-off. I'm in. My rates are reasonable. And for a cause this righteous, I'll even throw in a discount. We talked for another 20 minutes, hashing out a plan. He wasn't just an artist, he was a strategist, a co-conspirator. We were no longer a homeowner and a contractor. We were allies in the great war against beige. 3 days later, at 4:30 in the morning, a beat-up, paint-splattered van that looked like it ran on creativity and illegal substances rolled silently to the curb in front of my house. The side door slid open and Julian emerged. He was tall and lanky, with a man bun, paint-stained jeans, and a t-shirt that said, "Art is a hammer." He was perfect. "The eagle has landed," he whispered dramatically, as I met him at the curb with 2 mugs of coffee. "Welcome to the front lines," I whispered back. We stood on my sidewalk in the pre-dawn gloom, the only light coming from the street lamp at the corner. Sarah watched from the living room window, shaking her head but giving me a thumbs up. "So, phase 1, Julian said, taking a sip of coffee. "We start with something big, something that screams the natural order of things has been violated." I'm thinking. The chasm. For the next 2 hours, I was his apprentice. I acted as lookout, holding flashlights, and watched a true master at work. It was mesmerizing. He started with a chalk-line grid, plotting out the perspective points. He worked with a huge case of chalk pastels, blending colors with his hands, his feet, and special pads. He didn't just draw a hole. He created the illusion of depth, of shadow, of heat. He used darker colors to suggest infinite depth and bright oranges and reds at the bottom to create the shimmering illusion of magma. He was fast, precise, and completely absorbed in his work. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft orange glow over the neighborhood, it was done. Right in the middle of my sidewalk, the one Carol policed with such vigilance, was a deep, terrifyingly realistic chasm. It looked for all the world like the earth had split open, revealing a fiery core. It was magnificent. "All right, my man," Julian said, wiping his dusty hands on his jeans. "My work here is done. I'll text you in a couple of days for phase 2. Let me know how the premiere goes." He packed up his supplies, gave me a fist bump, and was gone as silently as he arrived. I retreated to my porch with a fresh cup of coffee and waited. It was 6:45 a.m. Carol's morning power walk was at 7 a.m., punctual as a Swiss train. At 6:59, her front door opened. She emerged, resplendent in a royal blue tracksuit this time, stretching her hamstrings. She started down her driveway, her eyes fixed forward, her pace brisk. She reached the sidewalk, took 2 steps, and then she saw it. The shriek was not human. It was a sound pulled from the throat of a pterodactyl that had just stubbed its toe. She stumbled backward, clutching her chest, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. She pointed a trembling finger at the abyss that had materialized on my property. The sound was enough to bring other neighbors to their doors. Gary from across the street, a good-natured guy who worked in IT, stepped out onto his porch. His eyes widened, and then he let out a bark of laughter. "Holy crap, Mark! You got a sinkhole!" he yelled, clearly in on the joke. Mrs. Gable, a sweet, elderly woman from 2 doors down, came out in her bathrobe. "Oh, my heavens! Is everyone all right? I'm calling the city." This was my cue. I walked calmly out onto my lawn, feigning surprise. Whoa, what on earth happened here? I walked to the edge of the chasm, peering down into the imaginary depths. Then I looked over at Carol, who was now hyperventilating. "Carol, are you all right?" I called out, my voice laced with fake concern. "Good heavens, what happened to the sidewalk? You have to watch your step. That looks like a nasty one." Her head snapped toward me. The terror on her face was instantly replaced by a furious, blotchy red. "You!" she sputtered, jabbing her finger at me. "You did this! This is a violation! This is a safety hazard! This is an abomination!" Gary from across the street was now bent over, howling with laughter. "It's amazing, Carol. It's an illusion. A damn good one, too. Mark, that's brilliant." Carol was not listening. She was already on her phone, presumably to the HOA, the city, the National Guard, and possibly the Ghostbusters. The curtain had risen on our little suburban theater of the absurd, and I, its humble director, was ready for Act 2. The glorious chasm lasted exactly 2 days. A heavy afternoon thunderstorm, which I'd secretly been praying for, rolled in and washed Julian's masterpiece into a muddy, abstract swirl of color before it vanished completely. For a few days, a fragile peace settled over the cul-de-sac. Carol seemed to have interpreted the rain as an act of God, a divine intervention on the side of aesthetic harmony. She'd walk past my house with a smug little smile, as if to say, "See? The universe agrees with me. I let her have her little victory." I knew what was coming. Sure enough, the following Monday, a crisp white envelope appeared in my mailbox. It wasn't stamped. It had been hand-delivered, a classic power move. Inside, on thick, creamy letterhead bearing the Northwood Estates HOA logo, was the official declaration of war. "Dear Mr. Henderson," it began, formal and cold. This letter serves as a formal warning regarding a violation of community bylaws. On Saturday, May 14th, your property was observed to have undergone an unapproved and hazardous surface modification. Refer Section 4, Article B, Subsection C. While the modification has since been rectified by natural weather events, any further such violations will result in escalating fines, beginning at $100 per day. The letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive corporate speak, but I could read Carol's indignant rage between every line. Hazardous surface modification. She was calling the chasm a pothole. This wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. A gauntlet thrown down on creamy, expensive paper. It was the best $100 I was ever going to spend. I took a picture of the letter and sent it to Julian with a simple caption. "Phase 2 is a go." His reply came a minute later. "Let's give the lady something a little more personal this time. I'm thinking, aquatic." He arrived that night, same time, same beat-up van. We huddled in my garage, which we'd designated our official command center, sketching out ideas on a whiteboard. "The chasm was great for shock value," he said, tapping a marker against the board. "But now we need to get under her skin. What does she love? What does she cherish?" "Her prize-winning azaleas," I said instantly, "and her collection of tacky lawn gnomes. There's one, a fisherman, that I think she's weirdly in love with." Julian's eyes lit up. Perfect. This time, the artwork was less about geological terror and more about whimsical, targeted mockery. Julian spent the night creating a giant, cartoonish octopus, its body sprawled across the main part of my sidewalk. It was a friendly-looking creature, with big, curious eyes and a slightly goofy smile. But its tentacles? Oh, its tentacles were pure genius. 2 of them appeared to be reaching over the property line, mischievously plucking the flowers from Carol's prize-winning azalea bushes. Another tentacle was playfully juggling 3 of her lawn gnomes, including the beloved fisherman. The illusion was perfect. From the street, it looked like a friendly sea monster was gently vandalizing her yard. The reaction the next morning was even better than the first time. There was no shriek, There was a low, guttural growl, like a cornered badger. Carol stood on her porch, fists clenched, staring at the scene. The community reaction, however, had shifted. Gary was out again, this time with his phone, taking a video. Mrs. Gable was admiring the colors. A car I didn't recognize actually slowed down as it drove by, the driver giving me a thumbs up. My sidewalk was no longer a sidewalk. It was an art installation. The Chalk House was becoming a local attraction, and Carol, the curator of Beige, was absolutely incandescently furious. She didn't say a word to me. She just marched back inside her house, the door slamming with a percussive boom that echoed down the quiet street. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that she wasn't retreating. She was reloading. For 2 days, the octopus reigned supreme, its cheerful, 8-limbed mockery a delight to everyone but its intended audience. I'd catch Carol peering out her blinds, her silhouette a study in simmering rage. I knew she was planning something. I just didn't think she'd go nuclear. It happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I was in my office on a boring conference call when I saw the flashing lights through my window. 2 police cruisers were pulling up to the curb, one parking behind the other. My heart did a little tap dance against my ribs. This is it, I thought. She actually did it. I excused myself from the call and walked outside, projecting an air of calm, casual curiosity I was very far from feeling. Carol was already on the lawn, talking to the first officer, a tall, weary-looking man who had the expression of someone who had seen it all and was deeply unimpressed by it. His partner, a younger, sharper-looking officer, was looking at the octopus, then at me, then back at the octopus, a small, unprofessional smile playing on his lips. I recognized their nameplates from a neighborhood watch meeting, Miller and Davis. "And it's a clear case of targeted harassment," Carol was saying, her voice high and strained. "He is using this graffiti to cause me emotional distress." Officer Miller, the senior one, sighed a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 ridiculous domestic disputes. He turned to me as I approached. "Afternoon, sir. Are you the owner of this residence?" "I am," I said, offering a friendly, non-threatening smile. "Mark Henderson. Is there a problem, officers?" "Well, your neighbor here, Miss Albright," he said, gesturing a thumb toward Carol, "has filed a complaint regarding the octopus." He said the word octopus with the deadpan delivery of a man who would rather be anywhere else. "She claims you're vandalizing your own property to harass her, and that it's creating a public nuisance," Officer Davis added, his eyes twinkling with what I was sure was suppressed laughter. I adopted my most reasonable person voice. "Officers, with all due respect, it's chalk, on my own property. My kids and I have been getting into sidewalk art lately. It's a family hobby." I intentionally left Julian out of it. "It washes off with water. In fact, the forecast calls for rain tomorrow." Carol scoffed. "It's not a hobby. It's a targeted campaign. Look at it. Its tentacles are clearly invading my property space and accosting my gnomes. It's an aggressive cephalopod." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. Aggressive cephalopod. That was a new one. Officer Miller walked over to the artwork. He crouched down and rubbed a small section with his thumb. A smudge of blue chalk came off on his finger. He stood up, looking at Carol. "Ma'am, it's chalk," he said flatly. "But it's harassment," she insisted. "Is he on your property? Has he spoken to you? Has he threatened you in any way?" Officer Davis asked, taking over the questioning. "No, but the implication—" "Ma'am," Officer Miller cut in, his patience clearly evaporating. "Let me be very clear. There is no law against drawing a well-rendered octopus on your own sidewalk. As long as the art isn't obscene and doesn't permanently deface public property, there's nothing we can do. This is a civil matter, and frankly, it belongs with your homeowners association, not the police department. He then turned to me. Sir, I'd advise you to, try and be a good neighbor. He gave me a look that was part warning, part conspiratorial wink. But you haven't broken any laws. They got back in their cars. Carol stood on the sidewalk, utterly defeated, as they drove away. The public legal humiliation was complete. She had called in an airstrike, and the bombs had turned out to be water balloons. As the second cruiser pulled away, Officer Davis, who was in the passenger seat, caught my eye. He gave me a slow, deliberate nod and a ghost of a smile before turning away. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a massive victory. The law itself thought Carol was ridiculous. Check and mate. I should have known that a public spectacle involving 2 police cars on our sleepy cul-de-sac wouldn't go unnoticed. Gary from across the street hadn't just been watching, he had been documenting. That evening, he posted a photo of the magnificent octopus, a second photo of the police cars parked in front of it, and a short, hilarious summary of the chalk war on the official Northwood Estates community Facebook page. The post was a digital wildfire. Within an hour, it had 100 likes and dozens of comments. Team Mark for the win! This is the most exciting thing to happen in this neighborhood ever. My husband and I are driving by tonight to see the octopus. It was a sensation. From there, someone shared it to a larger city-wide page. Then it hit Twitter. A friend texted me a link to a Reddit thread titled, "My neighbor's HOA dispute has escalated to police intervention over a chalk octopus." The post was on the front page of our Mildly Interesting. My little act of petty revenge had gone viral. By the next morning, things had escalated beyond my wildest dreams. I was making coffee when Sarah yelled from the living room, Mark, you might want to see this." I walked in to see her pointing out the window. Parked on the street, right where the police cars had been, was a white van with the Channel 4 News logo emblazoned on the side. A reporter and a cameraman were getting out. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," I muttered. My phone rang. It was Julian. "Dude, you're famous! Turn on the news!" he said, laughing. "Don't say anything without your art consultant present." The reporter, a young, eager woman named Jessica, rang my doorbell. I took a deep breath, pasted on my best "aw shucks" face, and answered the door. "Mr. Henderson?" she asked, microphone at the ready. "Jessica Chang, Channel 4 News. We heard about a bit of a neighborhood art project you have going on." I decided to play the part of the bemused, art-loving father to the hilt. "Oh, this old thing," I said, gesturing to the octopus. "Yeah, the kids and I have just been having some fun with chalk. Trying to brighten up the neighborhood, you know?" The interview was a masterclass in strategic omission. I talked about fostering creativity in children. I talked about how wonderful it was to see neighbors stopping to chat and admire the art. I talked about community spirit. I never once mentioned Carol, the HOA, or the term aggressive cephalopod. I just let the art, and the very visible police visit from the day before, speak for itself. That night, we watched ourselves on the 5 o'clock news. There was my house. There was the octopus in all its glory. There was me, looking like the most reasonable, fun-loving dad in America. They even interviewed Gary, who gushed about how the art had brought the whole block together. They cut to a shot of Carol's house, her blinds tightly drawn, while the reporter's voiceover mentioned one neighbor who has filed complaints citing HOA rules. I was no longer just Mark. I was Chalk Dad, a local folk hero fighting for the right to doodle. The war was no longer just on my sidewalk. It was being broadcast in high definition across the entire Tri-County area. The media attention was the final straw for the HOA board. They were a council of 3 retirees whose primary function was to measure lawn height and approve shades of beige paint. A TV news story about their draconian enforcement of chalk on art bylaws was a PR nightmare. 2 days after my television debut, another envelope appeared, this time summoning me to an emergency meeting to discuss community standards. It was scheduled for Saturday morning at the community clubhouse. The clubhouse was a sterile, windowless room that smelled faintly of chlorine and regret. When Sarah and I walked in, it was a packed house. It seemed like half the neighborhood had turned out for the showdown. I saw Gary, who gave me a subtle nod of support. Mrs. Gable gave me a warm, crinkly smile. On the other side of the room sat Carol, flanked by 2 other women who looked like they'd been personally wronged by a box of Crayola. The meeting was called to order by the HOA president, a flustered man named Mr. Henderson, no relation, a fact I was eternally grateful for, who looked like he'd rather be undergoing a root canal. He opened the floor, and Carol rose to speak. She had prepared a presentation, a full-on PowerPoint slideshow. She clicked through slides showing my offensive artwork, grainy photos of the police cars, and close-ups of the HOA bylaws highlighted in yellow. She spoke in a trembling, dramatic voice about the erosion of order, the sanctity of property values, and the nightmare of living next to a serial provocateur. "This is not about art," she concluded, her voice rising to a crescendo. "This is about respect. Respect for the rules that hold our beautiful community together. If we allow this circus, to continue, what's next? I ask you, what is next?" She sat down to a smattering of polite applause from her side of the room. Then Mr. Henderson sighed. "Mr. Henderson, Mark, do you have a response?" I stood up, holding a single sheet of notes I'd jotted down. I looked around the room, making eye contact with my neighbors. "Thank you, Bill," I began. "I do. First of all, I want to apologize. If my family's art projects have caused anyone any genuine distress, I am truly sorry. That was never the intent." I paused, letting that sink in. But I have to disagree with Carol. This is about art, and it's about fun, and it's about what kind of community we want to be. I've lived here for 7 years, and I'll be honest, I've met more of my neighbors in the last week standing on my sidewalk than I have in the previous 7 years combined. We've been stopping, we've been talking, we've been laughing. Kids from 3 streets over are riding their bikes here after school just to see what's new. I looked over at Carol. Rules are important. They keep our community safe and clean. But we also have to be a community that has a soul. A community that doesn't fine a family because their 6-year-old drew a unicorn with too many legs. A community that sees a chalk drawing not as a violation, but as a sign that children are happy and playing here. The news story wasn't a nightmare. It was a story about a neighborhood that's creative and fun. And frankly, I think that raises our property values far more than enforcing a uniform shade of taupe ever will. I finished, and the room was quiet for a moment. Then Gary started clapping. Then Mrs. Gable. Within seconds, a wave of applause filled the room, drowning out the feeble clapping from Carol's corner. People were smiling, nodding. I had won them over. Mr. Henderson, seeing the overwhelming shift in public opinion, cleared his throat. "Well," he stammered, "in light of community feedback, the board will be tabling Miss Albright's complaint indefinitely to review our policies on temporary surface decorations." It was a total capitulation. Carol sat there, her face pale, her slideshow forgotten on the projector screen. She had brought her fight to the highest court in the land, and the jury of her peers had laughed her out of the room. Walking out of that clubhouse felt like the end of a movie. The war was won. The tyrant was toppled. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Chalk Dad for president," she whispered in my ear. But I knew it wasn't over. A victory this complete required a grand finale. Not an act of aggression, but a peace treaty. A final, glorious mic drop that would transform this silly feud into something permanent and positive. I had an idea, but this one required more than just chalk. It required concrete. My sidewalk, frankly, was a cracked and pitiful thing, a relic from the 80s when the houses were built. It was the perfect excuse. I decided to rip the whole thing out, along with a portion of my driveway, and pour a brand new, pristine, extra-wide concrete canvas. It was the ultimate power move, making a permanent HOA-approved structural modification to my property for the sole purpose of creating better, more elaborate, temporary art. The irony was delicious. I called a company called Franklin & Sons Concrete and Landscaping. The next day, the owner himself, a big, burly guy named Frank with a handshake that could crush walnuts, came out to give me an estimate. He walked up my driveway, looked at the faint, rain-washed remnants of the octopus, and broke into a huge grin. "Wait a minute," he boomed. "You're Chalk Dad. I saw you on Channel 4. My wife and I were cheering you on. That octopus was a thing of beauty." I laughed. "That's me. And that's the reason for the call. I want to replace all this. Make it wider, smoother. I need a perfect canvas for the next project." Frank slapped me on the back. "Say no more. I get it. You're making a statement. My daughter loves to draw with chalk. We'll do it at cost. Call it the Artistic Freedom Discount. We'll make this new walkway so smooth your artist will weep with joy. We'll give him the best concrete money can buy." He was a man of his word. For the next 3 days, my front yard was a hive of activity. His crew arrived with jackhammers, a bobcat, and a giant cement mixer. The noise was prodigious. The disruption was significant. It was one final, glorious annoyance for Carol, a symphony of construction that was completely, totally 100% by the book. I even saw her on the phone, probably checking the HOA bylaws for noise ordinances, only to find that construction was permitted between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. She couldn't do a thing. It was beautiful. Once the new concrete was poured, framed, and perfectly cured, I made the final call to Julian. "It's time," I said into the phone. "The masterpiece," he replied, his voice low and reverent. "I have a vision." This time, he didn't come alone. The news story had reached the local art school, and he brought 2 young, enthusiastic students with him as assistants. The news cameras were back, tipped off by someone, it was probably Gary, that the Chalk Dad was creating his grand finale. This wasn't a clandestine pre-dawn operation. This was a public art event. They worked for 2 full days. Neighbors brought out lawn chairs and coolers of drinks, watching the creation unfold. It was a block party. Julian and his team worked tirelessly, their hands and clothes covered in a rainbow of chalk dust. The final piece was breathtaking. It was no longer an attack. It was a gift. Julian had created a stunning 3D illusion of a crystal-clear river flowing down the new, wide expanse of Sidewalk. The water seemed to ripple and churn, with colorful, cartoonish fish swimming just below the surface. There were lily pads you felt you could step on, and a small, charming wooden bridge that seemed to arch over the water. But the best part was on the grassy banks of the river. He had drawn our community. There were caricatures of the neighborhood kids, Leo and Mia, of course, but also Gary's son flying a kite, the little Gable twins chasing a butterfly. It was a celebration of us, of our cul-de-sac, of the life and joy that filled it. It was beautiful, vibrant, and completely uncomplainable. As a final touch, a little secret between us, Julian added one tiny detail. On a rock on the far bank of the river, almost hidden behind a cattail, he drew a single, tiny, grumpy-looking toad, its arms crossed and a scowl on its face. It looked suspiciously like Carol. When it was finished, the entire neighborhood erupted in applause. People were walking up and down the sidewalk, marveling at the illusion, taking pictures with their kids on the little painted bridge. I gave a short speech, thanking Julian and his team, and thanking my neighbors for their support and for making our little street a true community. It felt bigger than just chalk. It felt like we'd actually accomplished something together. Throughout the entire 2-day art party, Carol's blinds remained shut. But I knew she was watching. She saw the news van, the crowd, the laughter. She saw the beautiful, joyful mural taking shape on the property she so despised. She was defeated. Utterly and completely. There was no bylaw against beautiful art that celebrated children and community. There was no complaint she could file that wouldn't make her look like a monster. Her reign, built on the flimsy foundation of rules and regulations, had been washed away by a river of chalk. She couldn't fight joy. She never came out. She never said a word. The following Tuesday, a "For Sale" sign was hammered into her perfectly manicured lawn. It's been a year now. A young, friendly family with 3 loud, happy kids moved into Carol's old house. The first thing they did was come over, holding a giant bucket of sidewalk chalk, and ask if their kids could add a drawing of a boat to the famous river. We had the river professionally sealed with a special matte coating that protects it from the rain, but doesn't make it slippery. It's a permanent fixture now, a local landmark. We still add to it sometimes, letting the kids draw new fish or flowers on the banks. And so the Great Chalk War of 2025 ended. Not with a bang, but with a block party. It started with a complaint and ended with a community. All because my kids wanted to draw a multi-legged unicorn. It just goes to show you, when confronted with unreasonable, soul-crushing bureaucracy, don't get mad. Get creative, get petty. And if you can, get an artist with a vape pen and a deep-seated love for aggressive cephalopods. You might just find you create something wonderful along the way.